All right, it's time for another cymbal batch spotlight video. I'm going to go through and talk about each of the ones that I just released as of the posting of this video to my website. We'll talk about the characteristics that they have and talk about why they sound the way they do based on the structure and how I made them. And you guys can let me know which one is your favorite in the comments below. All right, so first up we have this 22-inch Landmark. It weighs 2,335 grams. We have a slightly smaller hand-formed bell on this cymbal. It has a lot of topography. Basically what I did with this cymbal is I started with a thinner blank, built out the bell, and then when I was doing the lathing, I didn't lathe away as much of the hammer divots from the initial shaping. So it kind of leaves a sense of topography to the cymbal, which helps with dryness. The patina that I've added also has a wax finish. That's also helping with kind of drying it up. This is a drier sounding Landmark than I typically make. It kind of maybe could cross over into the Tributary series just with how much control it has, but it's got kind of a nice smoothness for being as dry as it is, which is why I left it as a Landmark. So let's check out how it sounds. So you can tell I'm having a little fun with it because it's a cymbal that the stick definition never runs away from you. I could be up here playing with the tips and that stick definition is still sitting on top of that wash. The wash has like a ceiling to it, which I love cymbals that have that kind of characteristic because they can be incredibly inviting to play. They're less harsh on your ears when you're sitting behind them, and you could really dig in and do kind of whatever you want to, play however you want to, and the cymbals kind of go there with you. So a cymbal like this that has the low hand-formed bell and the kind of topography, the kind of shape, and the patina is going to help kind of contain the sound in a way that it's kind of tricking my ears because it's like it's interesting enough for me to feel really invited into the sound and I want to play it more, but it's not so dry and it's not so lacking in other characteristics that makes it kind of boring. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. For like a lower volume, kind of more jazz centric ride or ride that's not really meant to be like in a rock band. So it's a very fun cymbal. I like it a lot. As for the shape, it's got like a medium low shape. I was going for something that was lower because I wanted a lower fundamental pitch and I wanted the crash to kind of have this nice low bloom to it. Again, the topography and the patina are kind of just holding everything in place, just giving it a ceiling so it can't exceed that ceiling. And something like this in a jazz context as a main ride would be really, really nice, acoustic jazz, because it would work well in a band setting, I think. So that's the 22 there. Next up, we have an interesting one that I keep telling myself I'm gonna make heavier cymbals, and I'm finally starting to do it. So this is a Reverie Foundation series cymbal that weighs 2,749 grams, 22-inch, weighing 2,749. It's got a bell that I hammered quite significantly to build it bigger. I'm going for a couple things with this cymbal. I'm going for something that could work in a rock context, but it could also still work in a like electric jazz or drum and bass, funk, hip hop. It could work in a lot of different genres. It's kind of got a range to it, I think, but it is sort of set up like a rock and roll ride in a way. So a rock and roll ride is typically going to have a lot of weight to it. It's going to have a bigger bell. But the way that I'm kind of making it more interesting to play is it's got this crazy topography near the edges. You can see the really deep hammer strikes there. That's helping contain the sound, give it a grit, give it a complexity, and also not let it run away from you. So it's not going to really build up and have too much sustain that's going to kind of run wild. It's going to be controlled, a little bit gritty, a little bit trashy, but the weight and the bell shape and all of that is going to make it to where it translates well in louder situations. So let's check it out. Yeah, so I could see this in all kinds of genres. I mean, you could play it in a big band. You could play it in rock, like I was saying. Studio use would be nice. It's got this really controlled crash. So you notice I was playing it, kind of what the cymbal was inviting me to do was sort of big crash, hit it really hard, and then go right back to the stick. And you could just hear that crash would open up. But by the time I got back to riding on it with the tip of the stick, it was right back there. It wasn't, the crash wasn't so overwhelming that it kind of muddied up the stick definition and took a while to die out so that you could hear patterns. So it's a very interesting cymbal, and I got to make more like it. So 22-inch Reverie prototype, 2,749 grams. Really interested in that one. Now let's go for the totally opposite vibe and talk about this 20-inch Tributary 1,744 gram, umbrella shaped, 4 brass rivets, really funky, very specific sound. Let's check it out. So this has some funk to it. This has some gnarly overtones, some dissonant tones. It's got a lot going on. It's almost got some like chords happening in there, like dissonant and some consonant, but some dissonant chords and notes. And it's a very wild cymbal. It's a cymbal I took through a ton of different iterations. I had it slated for an earlier batch that was going to post, and something about it wasn't feeling right. And then one day I walked into the shop, hit it, and felt some inspiration. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to take this thing taller. It's got an umbrella shape. It's got topography. It's got some pin lathing on there and the heavy patina. Cymbals like this are very specific, and they're not for everyone. There are guys that love this kind of trashy, it's got a trash to it. It's got notes and tones. It's got some dryness and some kind of a little bit of like an old K sort of characteristic. It's a very unique sound. And so people will ask me sometimes, they'll say, hey, my cymbal has a hum on it. If they're talking about sending me a mod, they'll say, hey, my cymbal has a hum, or like, what are your thoughts on hums? This is a good example of a cymbal that has hums. And to some people, the hums would be too much. And so you got to have the right kind of ear for it, the right kind of sensibility to be able to play it. You want to play it in a certain way, because there are certain places you can hit it and you hear like a wah, 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 kind of honking thing at you. You don't necessarily want to like focus on those areas when you're playing it, but those areas when you're playing in a cleaner place on the cymbal, those funky areas can feed the sound in a way that just creates a vibe. I don't know how else to describe it other than it's a vibe. It's like this gritty kind of gnarly thing. And then when you're in the context of a band setting and you've got other instruments going on, it can create this wonderful bed of sound underneath, as long as the hums are not too pronounced. So for me, if I'm ever going to leave notes and hums in a cymbal, I want them to be balanced. I want them to kind of live in a way where they're either working with the other tones in the cymbal, or they're low enough in the mix so that they're not just honking at you when you're playing, and to the point that it could even compete with the other pitched instruments on the bandstand. So very specific cymbal, interesting cymbal, great for some purposes. The opposite of what we just played. You know, this is more versatile. This is like much more specific. All right, next up we have, let's just do the other riveted rod I have. This is another Tributary, 19-inch, 1,570 grams, 3 equidistant small brass rivets. It's an umbrella shape, but it's got a cleaner sound. It's got a bigger bell. And this is more of like a classic umbrella vintage cymbal kind of sound. Let's check it out. Umbrella cymbals are very interesting because they kind of create this more round tonality, if that makes sense. So like there's pointed sounds, like sharper, more high piercing kind of sounds, and the more umbrella shaped the cymbal gets, the more rounded out the sound gets. The more the highs get kind of notched, the more you have a little bit more of a dragon's breath or a hissy kind of sound living in the underbelly of the cymbal's wash. You kind of get this sound kind of living underneath, and then the raised shape also brings the pitch of the fundamental up, which can also kind of help translate that stick definition in a way that's just clear and clean when factored in with other factors. So I think that the cymbal, the stick definition is really forward and like way out on top in this cymbal. I can really dig in, and that stick definition is going to always sit on top. It's like that first cymbal. There's a cap to how much that wash will billow up, and it kind of hits the ceiling, and it just won't get any louder. So you can really play harder, and you get more and more stick definition, but not necessarily as much wash. So dig that one. That's cool. All right, next up we got a 20-inch Labyrinth cymbal, 1,954 grams. No patina on it. This is the kind of cymbal that the Labyrinth series is a little bit more complex, interesting sounds. The Tributary really is like a patinaed version of the Labyrinth in a way, mixed with a little bit of the Landmark. But these were originally designed as kind of like the Bill Stewart-esque sound, and it's morphed into kind of its own thing. But this Labyrinth I think is nice. This is, being 1954 grams, it's a touch heavier than I typically make. And with this batch and the next batch coming, there's just some cymbals in there that are just a touch heavier. I'm bringing up the weights of my cymbals ever so slightly, or at least on some of them. Some of them I'm still making the paper thin stuff, but I'm bringing up the weights just slightly because I'm finding that the cymbals that we really love, we truly love on records, they're usually heavier than we think they are. And what we're going off of is just what we hear behind the kit. And so for us to kind of learn as drummers how to think ahead of our own sound and think of how stuff is translating is super important. Think of how stuff records. I mean, when you have a little bit more weight on a handmade, interesting, complex cymbal, touch more weight is going to help that translate, and really it's going to help your playing translate more. It's going to help you be clearly heard by your bandmates, and things are not going to feel muddy and mushy. Your time's going to be a little bit more clearly stated, all that. So this is a cymbal that kind of gives a little bit of that vibe, even though it's not that much heavier. I mean, it's about, I'd say, probably 100 grams heavier than my average weight that I make on a 20, or at least what used to be my average weight. So I'm kind of bumping everything up about 100 grams, 50 to 100 grams, and I'm just loving the sounds that I'm getting. So here's the 20-inch Labyrinth. I think this cymbal, again, this kind of has that sort of ceiling to it. I mean, I find that my ear really does sort of aim at these types of cymbals that have kind of a cap and a ceiling to where that wash will go. I just see way too many, when I research other drummers, the best drummers in the world, when I watch the videos of them playing, I see so often they're playing these really thin cymbals and they've got them all taped up. And so when I really started to develop my own sound as a cymbalsmith, I was just looking for ways of like bringing just a little bit more control into the sound than what was typical from what I would hear other people make or other companies make. And what that led me to do really is to make, come up with my own sort of layering process. So if you ever see any of my cymbals up close, you're gonna see a good amount of topography and you're gonna see pits, hammer marks. And what happens is I'll make the shape of my cymbal, hammer the basic shape, then I'll lathe, do the initial lathing, then I'll go back in and hammer, and then I'll lathe a little bit more. And sometimes I even do another round of hammering and lathing. And so there's this like layered process of compression points, lathing through the compression points, more compression points. And it creates, to me, it creates this sense of control. And it's the thing that, to really oversimplify it, it's the thing that gives my cymbals a little bit more of a ceiling, a cap to the sound. I find that when you just shape a cymbal, you get the cymbal shaped exactly like you want it, and then you just lathe it and you send it out. For my ear, those cymbals, when they rest, they open up a ton and they just have a lot of shimmer and a lot of wash. And those are the cymbals that I see guys taping up, you know, because they're getting into a situation where maybe the venue they're in has got a lot of brick walls, and so there's a lot of reverberation, and so a lot of sustain from a cymbal is just going to overpower a room a lot easier. So that's when the tape comes out. So I still make cymbals that I aim to be a little bit more smooth and a little bit more sustaining, but you know, probably 75% of the cymbals that I make, I'm doing some level of layering to it, and I find that it's also my way of kind of capturing older sounds when you know, the alloy has aged a certain way and the alloy has gotten harder and more controlled. This layering process gets me similar sounds to that, so really love that. So let's move on to our last two in this batch, both Reverie series, and these are kind of crash rides. We'll start with a 19-inch here. This is a Reverie Prototype Foundation, 1,614 grams, 19-inch. Again, layered with these big old hammer marks, low shape. It's meant to be a little bit more of a crash than a crash ride, so let's check it out. Yeah, so if this was a crash, if I was just billing it as a crash, then I'd label it a quick crash or fast crash or something like that, because these pothole hammering marks here, these big divots on top, just really control the sound. And then you hit it like attack. The attack is super fast. It's not a sluggish cymbal at all. It hits you really quick, but then it dies really quick, which a lot of guys are gravitating towards these dark, dry, unlathed cymbals that have low shapes and big hammer divots because it's just giving them control. It's giving them the ability to get that quick crash accent, and then from there they can just kind of pull back into their groove, and they're not worrying about their crash cymbal kind of bleeding over top of everything else that they're playing. So I label it a crash because, as you heard, I can ride on it and get a sense of clear stick definition that sits on top of the wash. So that's a really nice one. I dig that. Last but not least, we have an 18-inch, and this is a kind of an interesting one that was sort of an experiment and turned out pretty nice, I think. I personally cannot stand holes in cymbals. I lathe them. I loathe them, and I can't lathe them, to be honest. I can't lathe over them. I loathe cymbal holes. I like sometimes the sound that they give, and I appreciate the place they have in music and drumming. But yeah, so I gravitate away from them, mainly because they can easily cause cymbals to crack. I mean, if you ever have like a super hold up, holy crash, it's always going to crack from one of those holes. So it kind of helps, it kind of makes the longevity of the cymbal a little bit less. And so with this cymbal, I was kind of going for something like, how could I do the most mild amount of holes to give it the quickness that the other cymbal had, honestly, but like a level of quickness and fast decay and quick action, but not so much that, and not so big either that it would be like a issue structurally for the cymbal. So I landed with, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 holes, all half-inch holes. I did a little bit taller of a shape for a crash. You typically don't want a tall shape crash because you get a little bit more, you get less sustain, less sibilance, you get that more round kind of sound, a little bit more hissy, dragon's breathy kind of thing. But I kind of landed in a good place with this one. I feel like it's just tall enough to give me some intrigue to it. It could be a ride, small little ride, but it also has a nice crash, and it's not feeling like sluggish or choked because of how tall it is. So last cymbal, 18-inch foundation with 8 holes. Yeah, I really dig that cymbal. I think it's got a very interesting character, kind of a unique thing. I don't make many cymbals like this. I don't know if I'll make another one like it ever. So that's the last in this batch. And as of the posting of this video, all these cymbals are available. But if you catch this video later on down the road, I still would love to know which one you think is your favorite. And if you have any questions too, please drop those in the comments below. I am dropping a batch of cymbals every 2 weeks, come rain or come shine. So I've got another one coming in 2 weeks, and then we've got the PASIC convention. Definitely have a lot of content there, and we'll be making a ton of cymbals for that convention coming up soon. So thank you guys so much for watching. Drop a comment below, hit the like and the subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see you guys next time. I'm Timothy Roberts. Thanks for watching.